One of our faves. He's the author of Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. He's Peter Schweizer. And Peter, always good to talk to you, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
You must be quite intrigued by the amazing backstory here of one Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who is now poised to be the vice president should the election go the Democrats' way this November. One thing in his bio which sticks out to me, and I still haven't gotten any real answers about it, is the fact that he has visited China, I believe, over 30 times. And let's just start with that. Just the fact that he has done that. Again, he was a member of the National Guard. He was a school teacher. And then he ended up being a member of Congress. Is that normal? Does that, if I may say, raise a red flag that a school teacher decided to proactively go visit communist China over 30 times during his career?
Well, you could charitably say, well, he just loves the Chinese people in China. But when you start to unpack it, it looks very interesting and troubling. He's tried to characterize it as these are exchange programs. Harvard University was involved, and it was just kind of a cultural exchange. But when you dig into it, you realize, no, actually, Harvard University had nothing to do with it. Harvard did not fund it. The program he ran was run by two Harvard graduates, but the university had no ties to it. And then the funding. If you look at the early press accounts by Walz himself in the 1990s, he bragged about the fact that the Chinese government was actually paying the bulk of the cost for these kids to travel to China. And the advice that he gave to students, again, this is contemporary, is back in the 1990s, he told the American students to downplay their Americanness when they traveled to China, which is kind of bizarre if the purpose of a cultural exchange is to actually have an exchange.
Right. We're going to go do a cultural exchange, but by all means, hide your culture while we're there.
Right, exactly. We wouldn't tell Chinese students to come here and play down your Chineseness. That would be ridiculous. The other part of it is this sort of glowing explanation that he would give students about the Chinese system. He described to students how this is a system, unlike in the United States, where nobody's poor because everybody shares. Of course, the compulsive dictatorial regime of China, sharing is voluntary. So certainly calling it sharing is an extremely charitable explanation. And I think this is part of the problem. Here's the other interesting thing, Larry, is that he had a meeting with Premier Li, who's the second most powerful man in China, when he was in Congress. And in that meeting, he said, I was in Tibet in late 1989, and the Chinese officials interrupted him and said, no, you were there in February of 1990. In other words, they tracked him and they knew exactly what he was doing 30 years earlier.
Yeah.
Tim Walz, his finances are a bit of an anomaly, especially in presidential politics. He has no investments, no bonds, no stock holdings, and he has no real estate. He apparently doesn't even own a home currently. What do you make of that? That seems very odd to me. Most people who sort of rise to this level are have some financial security, often are wealthy, and not that there's anything wrong that he comes from modest means. But what do you make of that? It seems a little strange to me and to many observers.
Oh, it's a great point, Julie. Yeah, it is a little bit odd, and I think as it relates to the relationship in China, it's pretty clear what the Biden's motivation was. Right? It was very transactional. It was with they took in millions of dollars. I think in Walz's case, it seems to be more of kind of a true believer, and he will occasionally criticize the Chinese government for human rights, but then he will almost immediately say, yeah, but we have lots of problems too, and we're no better. In fact, he had that meeting with Premier Li in 2016, and by his own account, he said he told Premier Li, yes, you have human rights problems, but don't look to us as an example because we have as many problems as you guys do. And this is something that is enormously helpful to the Chinese Communist Party, and they call it big help with a little bad mouth. That's actually their expression. And what it means is look, we understand you're going to have to criticize us from time to time, but you're helping us in the bigger picture, and that is certainly the case when you look at Walz's record.
We're speaking with Peter Schweizer. His latest book is Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. But, Peter, your last book, Red Handed, documents a whole lot of exchanges between the Chinese Communist Party and elites in politics and in the media and in pop culture here in America. How, these elites get rich while they help China and their causes. And you mentioned in that book, if I remember right, Peter, these so-called cultural exchanges. There's a whole lot of stuff going on our college campuses, and there's a whole lot of things that happen in this country that is funded by Beijing under the guise of cultural exchange, but they're really intelligence operations, aren't they?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Larry. They call it elite capture. That's again their term. And elite capture, is basically saying, look, we want to get in good and, in a sense, capture the elite of a country. And they do this, right, not only in Washington, D.C., they do this with governors. They do this with members of Congress, with members of the state legislature.
Well, hold on. I mean, Tim Walz is a governor. Tim Walz was a member of Congress, and he was, I mean, what you're describing here makes it sound like China was sort of playing a long game with this guy.
Oh, I think there's no question about it. And when you look when he becomes governor of Minnesota, he does something very interesting. He's elected in 2018. At that time, most of the investment world is putting a brake. Pension funds, they're putting a brake on investing in China because of all the concerns that are being raised about the money's being building up their military. It's helping their foreign policy. So states like California and Washington State are slowing down their investments in China. States like Florida, where I live, are actually reversing and divesting from China. Tim Walz is the only one running toward them. He's the chairman of the Minnesota Investment Board, which invests their pension funds. And as he becomes governor, their stake in investments go up 70% since he's the governor. He's really one of the few, the only one I found, who's actually doing that. As governor, he also, shows up and gives speeches. In 2019, he gave a speech in Minnesota to a so-called friendship organization, which has been known for 20 years to be a front for the CCP and Chinese intelligence. The Biden administration says the same thing. He's the key line speaker. He's the only government official at any level who is giving a speech at this meeting. And it's not the only time that he's done it. So there are these really strange kinds of anomalies and behaviors that, he needs to give an accounting for. Because let's be clear, if Kamala Harris wins in November, he will set himself up to be the China guy, right? She doesn't have any experience. I've been there 30 times. Let me handle the Chinese portfolio. So we need to know more about this relationship.
Wow. I sure hope Dana Bash is calling Peter Schweizer before her big interview tomorrow and saying, hey, if you were me, what question would you ask Tim Walz? That would be some good journalism there. My friend and colleague, Peter Schweizer, one of the smartest men out there. Peter, thank you. Always great to talk with you, sir.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy it always. Thanks.